Forget the myths that the media's created about the White House. The truth is, these are not very bright guys, and things got out of hand.
Hunt's come in from the cold. Supposedly he's got a lawyer with $25,000 in a brown paper bag.
Follow the money.
What do you mean? Where?
Oh, I can't tell you that.
But you could tell me that.
No, I have to do this my way. You tell me what you know, and I'll confirm. I'll keep you in the right direction if I can, but that's all. Just follow the money.
I'm Chris Hill. Welcome to Money Unplugged. Thanks for being here. That opening clip is from the Oscar-winning film All the President's Men, featuring the 3-word line of dialogue that would become a North Star for political journalists and business journalists alike. Follow the money. And it seemed like an appropriate opening because today on the show, I talk with award-winning journalist Tess Vigeland. She spent over a decade as a reporter and host of Marketplace Radio's weekend show, Marketplace Money. And when it comes to financial media in the 21st century, if you're making a list of the most important contributors in radio and television, Tess Vigeland is on that list, without a doubt. We talked about how she got to Marketplace Radio. She grew up outside of Portland, Oregon. She was considering 2 very different career paths when she was thinking about college. And as you will hear, I had to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole about her first job as a teenager because it's like no teenager job I'd ever even considered before. So let's get into it with Tess Vigeland. What early memories of money do you have growing up in the rural suburbs of Portland, Oregon?
I really have no memories of money because my parents never, ever talked about it. I didn't have an allowance or anything. I grew up very privileged. I would say upper middle class, and never wanted for anything, and knew that our circumstances were pretty nice. The house that I had, even though it was in rural Portland environs, was very nice. I guess part of it for me was I felt a little pressure because of that, because I was in a very rural area where there wasn't a lot of money, but my family had a lot of money. And that wasn't necessarily something that all the other kids thought was cool.
It sounds like it might have been uncomfortable almost.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable. And, I wasn't the only one in my school, but I would say I was probably top 5% for family income. And it was uncomfortable. Yeah, that's a good word for it. And so I think that also contributed to why I never really talked about it with anybody, including my parents, because I was a little bit, I guess, embarrassed. But that didn't stop me from wearing like nice clothes and stuff.
Oh, sure.
So,
what was the first job you had when you were a teenager?
I had one of the coolest jobs a teenager could ever have. I was a classical pianist and was a very good one. I almost went to conservatory for university, and then ended up going to into journalism. But my first job was playing piano at Nordstrom. I don't know if you're an East Coast guy, right? I don't know if there was Nordstrom on the East Coast way back when, but
not that I remember, not in Maine, but
okay. Well, there were a lot of Nordstroms on the West Coast, and it was the department store, and you would go in and there would be people playing piano, like kind of like you were at a bar, and it was
to provide
nice.
Ambiance to the shoppers.
Just to provide ambiance, yes. And so I did that for a summer. I worked in the brass plum teen department there for a little bit. So I sold clothes, But the piano playing was my first paying job, and that was pretty freaking cool.
Do you remember what they were paying you by the hour?
Oh, geez, no. No, I don't. I don't think I paid attention. I didn't even care about the money. I just wanted to play for people, and it was just fun. So I don't think I even knew I don't even know that I knew what the paycheck was. Probably gave it to my parents to deposit it for me.
In terms of the music that you're playing, are they leaving it up to you? Are they giving you specific instructions? You have to stick to, Beethoven and Mozart or that kind of thing? Or is it, no, just play whatever you want?
No, it was play whatever you want, but I did kind of a mix of classical, but not, I didn't play Beethoven's Fifth or anything like that. Like I didn't play anything that was super loud and obnoxious. I would play, Brahms. I would play Chopin, things that went along with shopping. And I also would do some easy listening. So I would have sheet music of whatever was popular back in 86, 87.
Right.
And so I would just kind of mash those up a little bit. Not actually mash up the pieces, but I would sprinkle things through when I was playing. But no, they were like, whatever you want to play.
The piano version of soft rock in the mid-'80s.
Basically, yeah. I don't think they specifically banned me from AC/DC, but I did not get any sheet music for them.
No, you add some flourishes to it. You make it sound like Chopin wrote Highway to Hell. That could be great.
I'm going to work on that, actually, and see if I can go play that.
See if you can make that work. So let's go back to the decision that you were facing when it came to college, because I don't know how it works in terms of musical prodigies who are going to study at the collegiate level and how money factors into that. But how did you and your parents make the decision of, I'm going to go to college and study to be a journalist versus I'm going to really pursue classical piano?
It's funny because I had not thought of this as a monetary decision, but when you prompt me, it actually was, because in my head, the only way to make money as a classical pianist was if you were the best in the world. And then you could be a concert pianist. You could go play with the symphonies around the globe, and you could get residencies in places. You could teach, at the collegiate level, at the pro level. And if you weren't that good, then really your only option was going to be a private teacher. And I was going to make no money. So I decided to go into journalism. Where I also didn't really make any money for a long time. But the reason I went into journalism was because my high school English, and this is so classic for so many journalists, right? My high school English teacher recommended that I write for the high school newspaper. And I started to do that and completely fell in love with it and ended up applying for journalism school instead of piano conservatory. Were my parents a little disappointed? Yeah. And all those lessons did go to waste for a long time, but then I ended up picking up piano again in my mid-30s. And it became a real joy for a number of years. But yeah, that decision, now that you mention it, was in fact partly based on money. It was also, I just got tired of doing something that was very lonely as a teenager, practicing a couple hours a day by yourself with nobody but your mom and dad really caring. And so I quit before my senior year in high school.
You may actually be the first person in history to say, I went into journalism for the money. I
was joking.
But when you lay it out that way, because I don't know anything about the classic piano industry and how money works in that world. And when you lay it out like that, yeah, it actually sounds like a better financial decision to go into journalism.
Well, and what I had in my head was, I'm going to be a famous TV journalist. I'm going to be on the network and I'm going to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what I ended up doing was going into public radio, which this is a very interesting time to be talking about that. But yeah, I did not make the big bucks for a very, very, very long time because it's a nonprofit industry. So.
What was the college experience like as a journalism student? Because a decent number of people I've talked to on this podcast, what they're studying in college is something they're interested in. It is not necessarily the pathway to a career. You know, I'm going to get a degree in history because I'm interested in it, but I'm not doing this so I can become a history professor, that sort of thing. You go in with the mindset of, no, I'm getting this journalism degree because I'm going to be on the network news. What is that like when you're at Northwestern?
Very difficult. The journalism school there essentially tries to weed you out the whole 4 years that you're there, starting with your freshman year when you take what's called basic writing, and they design it to get people out. And I almost quit because it was so difficult.
This is like when people go to college and they think they want to be a doctor and then they take organic chemistry.
Yep.
and that weeds them out. So Northwestern's writing class is their version of organic chemistry?
It is. Yes. And at this point, I couldn't tell you why it was so difficult, except that if you don't know real journalism, you probably underestimate how difficult it really is to get it right, to write in a way that brings in the reader and that keeps attention. And so all of those things that they started teaching us right when we got to campus were difficult. And I almost didn't make it out of the fire, but I did. And you know, I really enjoyed things from there on out. And they had something called teaching newspaper, where everyone in Medill, the Medill School of Journalism, it was a junior, you would be sent out to a newspaper somewhere in the country and practice newspapering. And that was unbelievably fun.
Where did you go?
I went to the Wilmington News Journal in Delaware. Great experience. I have fond memories of people teaching me there, except for the one time when they sent me to cover, again, I don't remember the details, but some scandal at the local high school. And I showed up in the parking lot, and the principal, a very large man, came out and started yelling at me. And I'm like 19, 20 at this point, and I ended up in tears. And I went back to the newsroom, and basically they're like, "Buck up, little camper." It's not the last time this is going to happen to you. But even before that, I had done a internship at Oregon Public Broadcasting in radio, and that's really when I fell in love with audio. And I did an internship at the local TV station. Did not love that as much. The newspaper did not love that as much, and really fell in love with audio. So
when and how does Marketplace Radio come into your life?
It comes in earlier than when I actually joined them, because when I was working at Oregon Public Broadcasting, I did a story about the very first Nike town. You know, the retail outlet. Nike is headquartered here in Oregon, just outside Portland. And they opened this new retail idea, which was everything Nike is going to be here at this store for you. And so I covered the opening of it and pitched it to Marketplace as a freelancer. And they took it. And that was my very first national story that I ever did. And I think it was maybe 2 years into my career. And then the reason I pitched them was because I had started listening to them while I was in college and really loved just the fun that they were having on air. And so I pitched that to them, and then I ended up pitching them quite a few other stories that I did out of Portland, including one where there used to be this program in the Oregon prisons where they put prisoners to work designing and manufacturing blue jeans, and they called them prison blues. And that was another story that I ended up doing for Marketplace. So I freelanced for them as a very young cub reporter before I ended up joining them later on in my career.
What steered you towards money? You graduate with this degree in journalism. You can go in any number of directions, covering city politics, national politics, world events, business, sports. I know you've dabbled in that as well. What is it about money that locked you in for the bulk of your career?
Well, it wasn't about money. For me, joining Marketplace was about, again, the way that they were doing their reporting. I almost didn't care what they were covering. And I felt the same way when I was doing sports. I covered national sports for 2 years out of Boston. And for me, it was much more about the way that they were covering that subject matter than the subject matter itself. They were doing all the social issues around sports. They were doing all the sports that nobody ever reports on, highlight and bowling. And so that's what drew me to sports. And then for Marketplace, for me, again, it was listening to them and having filed a few pieces for them that they were having so much fun. And you could hear that in what they were putting on the air. And it felt like me. The way David Brancaccio talked felt like how I wanted to present information to people as a journalist. And the way they explained things in a way that was just so basic and understandable and so not condescending for people like me who did not understand economics. I got a C in Econ 101. And so it was not a thing for me, but I wanted to work there so that I could produce journalism that made other people feel the way I felt when I listened to that show. So I didn't go there to report on money. I went there for the freedom to report in a way that was so fun and interesting and engaging. That was the only reason, the one and only. The only thing that got me to LA.
Don't feel bad about the C in Econ 101. I never even took Econ 101.
Oh, good.
As you think about a decade or so behind the mic hosting Marketplace Money and all of the stories, and this is an unfair question, I'm ask it anyway.
Uh-oh.
Is there a trend around money that you were happy to see improve in your years hosting? And also, is there a money mistake that people make that just never got any better during your time hosting, that you just think to yourself, wow, we're still talking about this mistake that people make?
Yes, to both questions. To the first of something that I saw get better over time, I would say that for all of the pain and agony it caused a lot of people, the 2008 financial crisis was a massive lesson in a couple of different ways. One, that you should never count on your house value, although I think we're probably kind of forgetting some of those lessons these days. I don't feel like we are back into where we were in like 04 and 05. So that's something I feel like people learned a real lesson from that. And I think they also learned a lesson about the stock market, that it can be very much not your friend, but also that it does come back, right? I think I will never forget March of 2009 when, the Dow had dropped to 6,500, I think. I mean, it just plummeted. And within a year, it was basically back. So I feel like people took those lessons on board and are much more skeptical of their investments and of thinking of their house as a ATM. I hope so. The one thing that I would say has not been learned and perhaps will never be learned, and it took me a very long time to learn this lesson, is that credit cards are evil. I use them. I now have probably more than a dozen of them. But if you don't learn very quickly how to manage them and handle them and understand that it is not free money, that it is something that you should pay off every single month and never carry a balance, there are so many people who still go into just enormous amounts of credit card debt, sometimes out of necessity. But the usurious rates that people are paying now, it's so sad to me. And I don't know how better to communicate that lesson to anyone. There are times when I wish that credit weren't available to people, like these credit cards, because it just gets people in such trouble. Including me. I was
going to say, did I hear you correctly? You have a dozen credit cards?
Yeah, I basically do for the points. I do the whole points thing, and I will open a credit card maybe for a $95 annual fee to get 100,000 points, and then I'll hold that for a couple of years. And sometimes I'll let it go. Sometimes I'll just hold it. So when I go and travel to that hotel or use that airline, that I get perks. I've made that decision that annual fee is worth it to me. I do not do the ones that are like $600, $700 a year. I don't do those, but I do have multiple credit cards and I can manage them now. For a long time, I could not, but I trust myself now and I never carry a balance. So yes, I have at least a dozen.
If you're like me, one of the things you've been doing this summer is grilling. I don't care how hot it is outside, I am putting my grill to use. And at the risk of sounding immodest, I serve up deliciousness every time. And it's only gotten better since I started using Dizzy Pig. It is my favorite source of rubs and seasonings. And last night, for the first time, I tried their glazed and infused sauce, and it was a total game changer. Right before I brought the food to the table, I just gave it a drizzle of the sauce, and it was perfect. At Dizzy Pig, they make their stuff in small batches, and they bottle them by hand. So don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Go to dizzypigbbq.com, use the promo code MONEY, and get 10% off your first purchase. Try their Crossroads barbecue rub. I've been using a lot of that this summer. Try the glazed and infused sauce. Honestly, you can't go wrong with anything they make. Just click the link in the show notes, go to dizzypigbbq.com, and you get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY. All right, let's get back to Tess. Before we get to the speed round, I do want to ask you a question related to the book you wrote 10 years ago. We were just talking before we started recording about the 10-year anniversary of Leap, leaving a job with no plan B to find the career and life you really want. I'm curious how much time you spent thinking about money before you decided to just up and leave the job that you had.
Not a lot. I was in a pretty privileged situation because I was married at the time. So we had a dual income family and his job was pretty secure and we didn't have any children. So it was a bit of a less of a leap for me than it would have been for a lot of people. That said, it's not like I didn't think about losing an entire paycheck. But I also, by that point in my career, had a confidence that I would be able to find a way, that I would be able to freelance, and or that I would be able to find another job. And this was 2012. The market was pretty good at that point. Podcasts were just starting. So I figured that I had the potential for a lot of other opportunities. That said, as you know, since you read my book, and we've talked about this before, I did not do a lot of thinking about it before I quit. It was the culmination of a lot of long years of frustration, and there was a breaking point, and I didn't put a whole lot of thought into what was going to happen afterwards. Now, that said, I also gave them 3 months. So it's not like I was like, okay, I'm leaving tomorrow. So I had a little bit of ramp down time. Money really was not the issue, both because we had a cushion and because I was very confident that I would land on my feet. And I did.
Well, and I remember us talking previously about people's reaction, friends of yours, colleagues of yours. And it was basically,
what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, it's like half of them are like, what are you doing? And then the other half are like, I would love to do that.
Yes, that's true. It really was a dichotomy, right? It was a lot of my friends a lot of them were listeners and fans of the show. And they were like, no, what are you doing? You can't leave Marketplace. And I said, I know, I thought I was going to die at this microphone, but sometimes things change. And then there were the other friends who yes, they said, you are living the dream. If only I could just up and quit my job. Now, of course, that has a couple of sides to it, right? There's one that's, oh, you lucky gal, you're so privileged that you can do this. But others were like, yeah, good for you, because this is really brave. And most people would not be willing to jump off the cliff like this. And I see it both ways. I think both that it was incredibly stupid, but also that it was extraordinarily brave. And I didn't feel like this at the time, but now I'm very, very proud of doing what was best for me.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have purchased that makes you happy?
Does it have to be one thing, or can it be so I've become a photographer, and my photography kit is what makes me extremely happy. If I have to narrow it down to one thing, I would say my 100 to 400 millimeter lens, which is my most recent purchase. I do landscape photography, and usually that means that you want a really wide angle for capturing grand vistas, et cetera, et cetera. But I've found that I use my longer lens, so 100 to 400 is a telephoto. But I use that a lot more to kind of isolate little scenes within a landscape. And I don't know, that has surprised me, because I started out doing, these grand vistas, and I still do that. But I really like picking out the little elements of a scene. And it's just a gorgeous lens. So I would say that's the purchase that brings me happiness all the time.
At the other end of the spectrum, have you ever made a purchase that you regret, and then sometimes you still think about it?
Maybe every once in a while I think about this, but not very often. When I went and traveled for 3 years without working in my late 40s and early 50s. And when I got back from those travels, I had basically spent 3 years with not much. Like, I had a suitcase and a photography bag and a backpack, and that was about it. And that's how I lived. And when I got back, I was like, I'm going to keep this. Like, I'm going to stay a low spender and, keep these great habits. But then I decided that I wanted a car, and I bought a fancy luxury car. And within a couple of years, I was like, I'm really tired of having to pay for, special gas for this car, and the tires are more expensive, like all this stuff. So I sold it and bought a not luxury car. And I look back at that and I'm like, why did I do that? I suppose if I put myself on the couch, I kind of know why, but I'm glad that I got that out of my system and then bought something a little more practical.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
Probably what we have already talked about, which is credit card debt can really hurt you. I got into deep credit card debt in my 20s. And, I think I look back and what I know was happening was I was trying to live the lifestyle that I had grown up with when I didn't have the paycheck. that I had grown up with. And so I got myself in deep trouble, and my dad bailed me out. And then I got myself in deep credit card trouble again, went through credit counseling and that whole thing that, and I wish that I had learned how to use credit responsibly much, much earlier, and how hard that can be emotionally to get yourself out of that. It is. I think for me, it was an addiction. And so that's one thing that I wish I had known a little earlier on.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself?
It wasn't one thing, but I went to Paris this past spring, and I went on a fashion shopping binge. So I did that for myself, and no regrets. Every time I go to my closet, I'm happy about it.
Nice. What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
The animals. I have been a volunteer. All of the animals, yes. All of them on Noah's Ark. No, the kitties and the doggies. I've been a volunteer and a fundraiser for humane societies in California, in Oregon. I was a foster parent for a while. I just love the little animals and the big animals. And, please adopt, don't shop, support your local animal shelter. They're doing the work of the angels, and they get my money.
Do you have a favorite movie or television series that has money as a through line?
I'm going to guess that you've probably gotten this before from your guests, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I'm a devotee of Shark Tank. I
don't know that anyone has said Shark Tank
Really?
before. Yeah.
I didn't start watching it until maybe 5-6 years ago. I just think it's an extraordinary education in entrepreneurship. It's painful to watch sometimes when some of the panel will go after people who are just thinking they had a great idea. But I think that's also a great learning lesson. And I love when some of their contestants will come back after being rejected. They'll come back with another try at the apple. And sometimes it works. So I just think it feels almost like an MBA watching it on television, and it's a whole lot cheaper.
The last thing is a penny for your thoughts, and this is just any bit of life wisdom that you want to share with people who are listening. It doesn't have to be about money, but it can be if you want.
I think the most important lesson that I have learned and put into practice later in life is your life doesn't have to look the way everyone tells you it should look. If you don't want kids, don't have kids. If you don't want to buy a house, if you want to rent for the rest of your life, rent. If you don't want to go to college, don't go to college. Figure it out. I mean, maybe that's not a good one, but you know what I'm saying? I feel like from the time we're kids, we are prescribed what our life is supposed to look like. And, it's the picket fence thing. And I went for that and still wasn't happy. And when I started conducting my life the way I really wanted to from the beginning, that's when true happiness came. And sometimes it's hard because people will look at you and be like, are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to do this thing that everybody does? No, I don't. And if you have the confidence to follow your own gut instinct of who you want to be, what you want to do, where you want to be, that to me is the holy grail of life. And I'm not saying that you should live it selfishly, but I am saying that you should not feel like you have to live a life that has been prescribed for you by your family, by your school, by your society.
There you go. Tess Vigeland's book, Leap, Leaving a Job with No Plan B to Find the Career and Life You Really Want, is available wherever you buy books. If you have questions or comments for the show, drop a note to info@moneyunpluggedpod.com. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.